In this week's Memes and Machines, you will see some new faces, some new perspectives, and we are tackling the elephant in the room, AI, more specifically generative AI. What are the top tools that we enjoy, that we benefit from? And we share our tales and stories of young kids, companies, and people that are making hundreds of thousands every single month by leveraging AI. And finally, we make some bold predictions. Who's going to live, survive, and who's going to thrive in the AI race?
If you bought a PS5 lately, then AI may actually be more tempting to you.
Tempting, wow, I like it.
There you go.
I'm going to be using AI to help me grow a 100,000 TikTok account in French, and I don't even speak French.
Boom. That's a good call to action.
Sit back, grab a cold beverage from the fridge and relax, because you're now locked into the sounds of memes and machines.
Memes and Machines is back, and it is back with vengeance, and as you will see, some new faces. Before I get into introducing the new faces, I want to give everyone a little bit of context of why we're here, why I'm here. I started Memes and Machines with Catman, Cathal, Catty about 9 months ago. Our intention was very pure. We wanted to have conversations every single week that inspired us. We wanted to talk on topics that we're interested in, whether that was personal to our startup journey, whether that was emerging technologies, or whether that was about marketing and the principles that we believe in and have spent our careers doing. The second thing we had to consider was, what would we do if we were to do something for the next 10 years? How would we go about it? Well, to do that, we would need to remove all friction, meaning this had to be easy, this had to be lo-fi, this had to be low effort. And after 9 months, I have got so much fuel and energy out of these conversations. But Catty and I spoke, and we find it very difficult to show up every week. We're both super busy. Catman lives in the US, I live in the UK, so it often means having conversations very late at night, and I think I do the conversation a disservice. So instead, we've decided to bring in some new voices, and we'll probably have a rotation of people join the program to get different perspectives, and we're going to try and level up this conversation. But the theme and the mission remains the same. Interesting conversations that marketeers, startups, or anyone who is interested in the attention economy will get value from. So that's my mini war chant monologue. I should have done it with an American flag behind me or something, something of that nature. Although someone has taken that to an extreme this weekend. On that note, look, I'm going to introduce you both, and I'm going to start. Chris, you're on my left. Give us a bit of your background, who you are, what you do, where we met, all of that jazz, and then Ben, over to you.
Yeah, cheers. Well, it's an honor to be part of the rotation of people coming into this podcast. Obviously, I agree with the ethos, hence I'm here. And I am a creative agency founder, and our agency is called Seedly. We basically deal with clients worldwide, dealing with their creative services on social media and other things like that. And then had the fortunate to meet both of you guys down in London very recently for the SEMrush Influencer Weekend, which was a hot one. And good to meet you guys finally in the flesh. I knew about both of your digital presence before this, so that was really cool that we actually managed to put a face to a name. And yeah, I have a co-founder, and we're a very small micro agency. Everyone assumes we're much bigger than the outfit that we actually are. People think we have 30, 50, 100 staff. Actually, it's just 2 of us. And we work with AI tools in order to work with big brands and perform marketing campaigns. That's basically us in a nutshell.
Chris, and on that, I will add, we had a conversation over a beautiful picnic. And I'll be honest, I think we solved every world problem. We talked about the future, the singularity, everything possible. And I will say there are very few people I meet that have such a passion for new things and combining what I call a rare skill stack. Like your background is creative, you've run an agency business, and you are bar none one of the most obsessed people I know with generative AI and emerging tech. So for me, I found our conversation fuel. And I thought, you know what, if we do this on a more regular basis, I think more people will get value from it too. So I do want to give you your flowers in that sense.
Cheers. Lifelong learner. That's the way to do it. That's my ethos. Lifelong learning.
Absolutely, my man. And Ben, how about you? Share your wisdom.
So I'm just full-time content creator. Still not really sure what exactly to call myself. I have many names. I primarily create content around creator resources is kind of what I've named it, as I've kind of moved into a sub niche of the creator ecosystem, and a very undersaturated one, but one that's like growing and booming as more tools come onto the market to serve the customer of creators. Everybody is talking about how quickly the creator economy is growing and creator-led businesses and that. And you know, there are still so many beginner creators wanting to be creators, influencers. It appears to be a very desirable lifestyle by many people from the outside, but the challenges still remain the same in terms of it's very difficult to become a content creator full time. You have to sacrifice a lot of time to hone your craft and your skills and figure out what niche you want to be or don't want to be in, and fitting or managing that in around a normal lifestyle, which has either you have a job or school or college or university. I'm kind of trying to help people navigate that, having been through what I've been through, and you know, how to make things easier and how to make better content by sharing different resources made by businesses, brands that are made for creators in their workflow. So the AI stuff has started to have a slow but steady impact on the creator workflow to help people produce more pieces of content and also better pieces of content.
Yeah, and what I love about your story, dude, is the fact that you're so open and honest, probably to your fault at times. But there's a sincerity to everything you speak on. And I think I discovered you maybe 9 months ago. And I don't know if I told you this, but the entire camera setup I had now, I really liked your style and how you narrated what you spoke about. I'm not a video editor, but I would often share your videos in our internal Slacks of like, hey, there's a really cool tool, or this is an animation style, or this looks really good. I think you make the creative art so accessible. And then when we met, I was like, oh, you're such a cool dude, and really love how unfiltered and sincere and authentic you are. So again, it was when we're thinking about, you know, bringing different perspectives. And one thing I will add to that, now as a full-time content creator, I think content creators are bar none the best marketeers on the planet. As practitioners, if you think of the dark art of social, that every organization in the world is paying, you know, tens of millions of pounds of resources and, you know, into capturing attention. And you do this with no resources, just time, commitment, creativity, and data, and like that reiterative process you go through. I think there's so much that marketeers can learn from content creators. And I think because of the influencer industry, we've almost trivialized the art. I think it's very easy to dismiss the art of content creation, which is integral and at the center of what I believe all great marketeers have. So I'm really excited to just have conversations with both of you. I think one thing I want to do is make sure that we're very dialed in and focused so that each episode gives very specific value to people. And because of both of your backgrounds, I would love to start this thing by talking about generative AI, the buzzword of 2023, 2024, probably 2020. I don't know how long we're going to use the word generative AI, but it's probably here to stay, unless you're right, Chris, and it has a rebrand. But give us your backstory of your first introduction to AI and then how it's influenced the work that you do. And I'll start with you, Chris.
So we were very fortunate. I'm not going to give us too much credit, honestly, about getting into generative AI as an early adopter, because we were privately reached out to by a platform that generates images called Midjourney. And the email read something like this: "We have identified you as being the top 20,000 art directors in the world. We love your portfolio of art direction, and we want you to have the earliest access to this tool so that we can get what's called RHLF, which is reinforcement human learning feedback. We want that from who we deem as the best people with art direction, and you're one of those 20,000. So I didn't research this and discover it. They discovered us. It was actually the opposite way around. Reached out to us, said, we've got an alpha rollout of this tool. This was 28 months ago, if I'm correct. And since then, we've been using like all of the AI tools as they come about, because we realize just how powerful they can be, especially when they get a large user base and lots of this reinforcement human learning feedback to iteratively get better over time. And we've adopted them full time. Pretty much every deliverable we do as a creative agency now has some form of AI in it. There's nothing you'll get from us that doesn't have AI in it. So it's gone from 1% of what we do to 100% of what we do in those 28 months.
Can I ask a question on that point? Because a lot of people, particularly around generative art, images, a lot of what you will see through Midjourney, there's been a fair bit of resistance, in part from the creator community and, you know, the ethics around how these models are trained. Like, you have a personal experience in being part of the, I suppose, the guinea pigs that are driving how these models evolve and shape and the outcomes of them. And then there's this other part where it's I suppose a personal perspective I have is that there's kind of a ubiquity to generative art where things feel the same. They start to look the same. And by definition, it kind of loses value. And that's what a lot of skeptics will say, that, you know, as marketeers, as artists, as creators, it is a impressive in a novel way, but isn't actionable, useful, and will have staying power. So give us a view on those 2 points. First, the morality and ethics and like some of the conversation around it. And then the second around how useful or practical generative art will be in the creative process.
They're 2 really good questions, honestly. And my ethics has changed over time since I've learned more about how these models were trained. Obviously, we live in pre-regulatory times, and that is wherever you are in the world. You could be in Europe, where they're going to have European AI. We in the UK, sadly, after Brexit, are going to have our own AI regulation, and then the USA will have their own. Japan has their own. Everyone has their own version of what's ethically okay, what's okay to be trained in, whether artists need to opt in or opt out. These are all of the things that I've started to learn about these models over the years. And honestly, I'm in a very gray area here, because I think that they are doing something that's transformative. And the courts would therefore rule that they are not infringing on copyright, even if they're trained on copyright images. But again, this is for lawyers to decide and not creative agency owners, clearly. But that's my typical stance on it whenever anyone asks me, is I think it's actually transformative. So it's not like, you know, you can't replicate a Van Gogh, you can't do other things directly out, even if you mention their name and the actual thing they painted, like sunflowers from Van Gogh. It's not going to give you the actual sunflowers from Van Gogh. So that's a quick bit about the ethics. On the second question, I would say there's no nice way to put this, so I'm going to be blunt. Engineers have this term, and I'm going to put it the light way: bad in, bad out. You know, there's actually a lot worse way I could say that, but I don't want to start this podcast by swearing. But essentially, if you're a bad prompt engineer, then you're going to get a bad outcome from Midjourney, and it's going to look very, very much like you said, like a Wikipedia type answer. But the same is true with all AI. If you ask ChatGPT a very bland prompt, it's going to give you a Wikipedia answer, and that's not valuable or useful. And if it hallucinates as well, and you've got to Google it afterwards, what's the value in it at all? Because then you've got an extra step in that customer journey. So if you're asking something that you're an expert in, and then its output is something that you deem to be highly valuable, then that's very valuable to you. So it's all about how you use it.
Yeah, on the latter point, there's a term that I love, and it was talking about the generative AI era, and it said mediocrity is free to everyone. Humans step
Yeah,
up. I went
that's
to
great.
I loved it, and I think it was the creative director at Essentia Song. I was at a dinner of advertising industry folk, and they were debating generative AI. And as someone that's got a keen interest in the space, but I also really love to hear the critics and the skeptics. And half the room was advocating, half the room had moral issues, ethical issues, were just dismissive. You kind of had, a good broad spectrum of perspectives. And they were debating like how generative AI means everything's going to look the same and feel the same. And to your point, and my rebuttal to that is kind of advertising all looks the same and sounds the same. And most of it, 90% of it right now, is mediocre anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So when we may 10x the volume of mediocre, but mediocre will always exist because we are talking about a creative endeavor, which is difficult to do. Everyone can have access to it. Everyone can think of an idea, but great art, great work, great marketing is difficult to do. So there will always be mediocre. We'll just see more of it.
Well, on that note, actually, I would say that you're absolutely correct. And the biggest companies to be worried are stock image and stock video sites, as opposed to creative advertising agencies, because it's not there yet.
Yeah, I agree. And Ben, from your perspective, I've noticed a lot of your content is anchored to, again, testing new tools and new products. Give me your history of like the pre-generative era, how you were going about your creative endeavors to like now. What's different? What's new? What's interesting? How has it influenced your work?
To be honest, currently right now, I don't use a lot of AI tools. Then a lot of them are not that valuable to a lot of segments of content creation. And if we just coin mine as talking heads,
Yeah.
like across all niches is very, very similar. The way that people create videos around somebody just sat at a desk or on a chair speaking to the camera. I try and think about how different AI tools can impact different steps of the content creation workflow. So anything from ideation to script writing to then pre-production. So the shot list or anything like the planning, and then recording, and then editing. There are tools that are being integrated into all of those different areas across the workflow, but nothing that I think, only I would say 10-15% are like, there's still a lot of manual work to be done by a creator to create a video. There are lots of different steps that have to be done, with care and attention to produce good output. The main area where I think AI, also on the point of everything looks the same, I just completely disagree with that sort of comment by the AI haters, because I mean we're in Gen 0.001 right now. Like in 2 years' time, everything's not going to look the same. And to your point, before you actually said it, I was like, well, people that make videos all their videos look the same anyway. You go on TikTok and you've got all of the non-AI stuff is all looking the same anyway. So what's the difference? I think the closest we are the closest we are to something being really, really, really impactful to a creator's workflow is stock B-roll, like what Chris said. The companies that make, so the Shutterstock, Storyblocks, Envato, the guys that have the big stock libraries, they're the ones that are going to be in big trouble because the B-roll footage isn't quite there yet. But B-roll footage in terms of a creator's workflow, particularly with talking head, is something that is the next step in like leveling up a video, like splitting it up, every 5 or so seconds, having something that, demonstrates, an idea or emotion, a backdrop. The only problem is that even just with general stock footage in general looks the same because everybody uses the same stock footage. And I think AI are going to take us away from that because it means I can generate custom B-roll in a certain color or tone, or when it gets really, 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 really good, I think I'm going to be able to generate B-roll with me in it, in and around my house or in and around outside, and it looked pretty decent. I don't have to go and film and record that because that's the biggest barrier for B-roll that's custom B-roll, which when you go from a creator, usually creators go stock B-roll, and in terms of leveling up their videos, and then they go custom B-roll. Custom B-roll, I mean, is when they film it themselves and it looks more natural, it's better, that's where I think AI is going to come in, is that like, how do I generate better custom B-roll that people look at and think, I can't really tell that's AI because it's only being shown for 2 to 3 seconds anyway.
Yes.
People keep complaining, oh, well, it doesn't have any feeling or emotion. But if the story that I'm speaking is in my talking head has emotion, and I cut to a 2 or 3 second shot of something that just contributes to the setting of what I'm saying, people aren't going to go, oh my God, that's AI, doesn't have any emotion for 3 seconds. Oh no, I don't like this whole video now. That's just like such a narrow perspective of looking at it.
Can I make a few observations here? You're exactly who I don't think AI is for yet, which is why you haven't been adopting. And I had a good chat with my friend. Yeah. This is a compliment to you, right? Because I would deem him as one of the top 1% of copywriters, and I would deem you one of the top 1% of creators. So therefore, these tools are made for people with less than average quality skill sets. It's about giving them the tools to enable them to do things that they didn't already do at an insanely high standard. So for you to get an AI tool set in your workflow, it's got to be as good as what you're doing already. The other observation is B-roll is perfect because the main issue with AI is the fact that you can't copyright any of its output, and no one wants to copyright B-roll. Who cares? It's just filler in a video, right? Like that's literally all it does is fill in between the talking head, like visual metaphors of the things you're talking about without it looking directly at the camera. So that's perfect because AI B-roll, anyone can take it, but then you're taking someone else's custom version of that B-roll and it doesn't need to be copyrighted. So just a few observations there.
No, I agree with your first point, well, both points, but firstly, like, but I've spoken about this quite a few times with my audience in terms of when you're a creator at a certain standard, the AI tools don't meet the needs of your standard, because especially with the script writing as well, a lot of people say, oh, you use ChatGPT, use Claude, give it all of your stuff. It still doesn't give what it misses out on nuances. The same with ideas and stuff. It just gives surface level. You can go deeper, but like a higher level content creator is far below the surface, far below the surface, and you can only get it so far. It's like it takes a beginner creator to an intermediate creator a lot quicker.
Exactly.
But to go from an intermediate creator to an advanced creator, I don't think there are many AI tools that anybody has mastered truly to like be of real value.
The only way I could see it working for an expert right now is if you really hated part of the job. Let's say it was a research, and that was just a bane in your creative journey, and the AI was really good at doing that. And, it's the only thing it's really good at for you at your standard right now. Then maybe you do that with the AI, as opposed to script writing, editing, all that other stuff, like you said.
I think building on both of those points is first and foremost, it comes down to definitions. Ben, you said 10% of what I do is I leverage AI. I'd argue it's probably 60-70% if you consider all the features that exist, or either visual search, cleaning up audio, doing some EQ, some compression. I think it comes down to the definition of the creative process. And if I look at within our business, and a marketing agency is so reliant on multiple stakeholders, meaning we have a design expert that is doing art direction, an editor, an animator, a project manager. You work in these small teams. I think one of the things that AI is enabling is empowering an individual like you to do so much more. So as an expert, you now have effectively way more resource and tools. It doesn't mean your outcomes will be any better. The stuff you produced before a lot of the generative applications and features and tools came into play was probably great. The stuff you produce today is great. So I don't think it's like fundamentally what we're creating. I just think the speed, the use, the access, the empowerment, all of those things. And generally on the broader point around access, I do agree that I think, and I'll speak from a marketeer's perspective, I think all mediocre agencies will disappear in the next 3 years. If you look at any category or industry, 70% of them are average at best. Then you have, 20% that are good practitioners of whatever they do, and then you have 10% that are elite. I think if you think of that 70% now, why would I now pay an overinflated agency fee because now I have a tool that does mediocre marketing for me for free or for a very low cost? And I think the same is to be said in the creator economy. I'm seeing a lot of these videos in the creator economy talking about automation stacks of like, hey, you have to do no effort. You can just set up a prompt. It will curate viral videos, and then it will pass it through to this GPT that then will write text, that will generate an image, create you a blog. And I go, that stuff's cool. The workflow and the thinking behind creating that automation is interesting. The outcome is just more and more useless content that serves no real value. So I think for real creators, many of them are resisting and skeptical of the opportunity. I actually think you should look at, if you're a creator or a marketer, I think you should look at what's happening and go, fantastic. In many respects, like if I'm good at what I do, I now have every advantage over 90% of the market as a consequence of that. So I think there's duality to any of these things where you can, I'm a natural optimist, so I'm trying to lean into those things. Just to give me or to give anyone listening, from both of your perspectives, can you share 3 tools that have been revolutionary to you? When you go, these are 3 things in my toolkit that are just creating goddamn magic. What are they?
Should I go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, just on your point of optimism, I wanted to say, as a previously existing creative agency before AI, I've found actually there's a lot more interest in what we do prior to AI. And that's because CEOs can try things for free using AI, and then it works for them. And then they go, who's the best one out there to level this up? It's like dipping their toe in the shallow end of a pool for free is actually very beneficial, because then many more people realize how good design or branding or these social media can be for them. So actually, it's a much wider pie. We're not all sharing. It's not a finite pie. It's getting wider and wider and wider by the day. So just on that point, I'm quite optimistic about that too. It's not taking design jobs away. It's actually increasing the interest in design, as I find it. But yeah, 3 tools from me. I'd say thank you to Midjourney. I have to give them a shout out. We wouldn't be in this AI game without them. Plus, it is literally the best image generator on the market that's available. The one annoying thing about it, doesn't have an API. For those not in tech, that means you can't connect it into other things very easily. It's kind of siloed and standalone. You have to use it. Yeah.
Can I just add to that? The thing I think holds Midjourney back in every sense, and this is why I don't know, and there are obviously things happening which I'm sure you'll build on, is the fact that it's just siloed to Discord for the majority of users. Discord is like a really clunky user interface.
I've got some news for you.
Coming hot off the press. He's here.
Yeah, so
okay.
You have to be an elite Midjourney user to have access to this right now, but there's a totally new web interface that's amazing. And it's actually the cleanest I've ever seen. So actually, they've gone from the worst, i.e. Discord, to the best interface in a website I've ever seen. They may be launching a mobile app too. Hey, we got the soundboard. Thank God they pulled that one out of the fire. And actually, you know, I've got a bit of a backstory to tell you here. The actual Midjourney founder himself, who does live podcasts that I tune into every week, said that they use Discord in order to make the best image tool on the market because they didn't want to focus on the user interface and the other distracting things. So kudos to them. You know, they had their Polaris North Star, as I call it in marketing. Their goal was, we want to be the best image generator on the market, and we'll do anything to do that. So then they used Discord to host the servers and make all of that worry go away so they could just focus on the image model, and they did it. They're the best, and now they've got the best interface. So win-win for those guys. Second tool I'd recommend, Runway. It's an incredible animation tool. It has multiple tools, actually. It's not just video creation or animation. It can do image to video, text to video. They have loads of different features. So just look up Runway ML if you're brand new to this. That's the second tool. And the third tool I'd recommend is 11 Labs. They are the most insane, game-changing audio producing platform I've ever seen. You can get famous people to read out your podcast now for free. They just introduced this last week where they actually paid celebrities to have a voice in 11 Labs. So if that's of interest, that's something. But they do everything, you know, best audio in the game, best voices by far.
Does that mean that the what's the platform called where you pay to get like someone to read you a birthday?
Oh yeah.
Does that mean Cameo?
Cameo. No, because these guys have done it properly. You know, they've paid big actors in order to come do a studio session, and they give royalties every time someone prompts them. So it's just going to be a version 2.0 of Cameo, and only if people agree to it. They're not just going to be, you know, training on the swabs of the internet and then letting you prompt in Mick Jagger's voice or whoever you want. That's not going to be their approach. So they're doing it the official way. And they've only got 5 big celebrities so far. I can actually have a look who the celebrities were.
Get off the fence, Chris. Say Cameo is finished. We need some.
No, I can't because it's not true. It's not true. Cameo is actually a pretty interesting platform. Oh, so they got Judy Garland, James Dean, Burt Reynolds, and Laurence Olivier. They're kind of old school, you know. The new school kids won't know who any of those people are, probably.
So this is an adjacent point. So if you look at, I'll give you a tiny bit of backstory on Cameo. Cameo is the business that is symbolic to me of businesses that make all the sense in the world. You go, they have this unique authority. They've created a marketplace that empowers individuals with notoriety, celebrity, fame, attention, gives them a revenue stream. And they became a destination of a regular kind of birthday purchase. Cameo have just gone from like a multi-billion-dollar valuation to being slashed in their last funding round. And they did that for a number of reasons. One, you're seeing it a little bit with Duolingo, the threat before generative AI and before the application of avatars and voice synthesis and all of these tools that became readily available. There's a threat there, but there's a broader point around creating a business whereby like people come to you once, they do it once or twice, then they don't repeat. It's like almost a flawed marketplace business model that has everything working for it, so it should succeed. They had first mover advantage when it comes to generative AI, creating avatars for celebrities. They have all the relationships. They could have done much of this if they'd invested in R&D and been a front runner in this space, or done a partnership, or acquired a HeyGen, or acquired 11 Labs, you know, during that journey. And yet they're, in my view, are probably going to miss the mark. They're one of those classic stories of like startup that had everything going for them, but they had a flawed business model and they've just taken their eye off the prize. And I think they will die. I am going to call it that. I don't see them succeeding.
So you're calling a blockbuster moment to Netflix because they literally had the chance to buy Netflix. That's exactly what Blockbuster had.
this is a blockbuster moment for me, and I actually like Cameo. I've spoke to their partnerships team historically in the past. I thought it was a wonderful business, but it's now, I just see too many conflating factors, meaning they probably won't win as a consequence of that.
Wow. Big
There
call.
you go. If I'm wrong, I'll bury this in the internet. If I'm right, I will clip this point, timestamp it, and drop it to build my own myth. That's what I'm doing. Ben, drop us some knowledge. Give us some tools that, in the 10% that have like enhanced you, what are they?
Probably like either ChatGPT or Claude. I'm like not much of a. I don't care about the nuances between the those sorts of tools and the models. I took a long time to figure out how they would become valuable to me as a more an advanced level creator, as we discussed earlier, because I felt like me just being a beginner user of those tools was not getting like advanced level output. I found over time my best use of those tools is around evaluation of my work, and how to improve it, whether that be my scripts, my videos that already exist, and their performance data, and using it to do big jobs, big evaluation jobs. Like I will go and input my transcripts from my last 50 videos and input performance data and ask it to just evaluate and give me suggestions on stuff to make videos on. I'm not going at the beginning I was using this tool like, oh, could you write me a script on this, and it just give me nothing, or can you give me 10 ideas on this? So what I do is I take my expert knowledge that already exists in some format, and then I use that as the data to inform its decisions for me around content, ideas, and so on and so forth. And I use other people's as well. So like I'll find a really good YouTube video on something that's relevant to me and I really like it. I'll copy and paste the whole transcript into ChatGPT and ask it to give me like 10 different angles on the same topic that I could make a video on. And I find that is so much more valuable to me, because then it's starting at a point that's already up here, rather than giving it nothing. Because this is what everybody says: if you don't give it anything, it doesn't know. It just pulls from the internet at different sources, and you don't know where it's pulling from. And unfortunately, the sources that it pulls upon across the internet are just a low level. I always had this question about, well, how does it know if all of the blog articles and everywhere it pulls information from just says this? But there's two people saying something that's really, really nuanced and really like, wow, that how does it know that that's actually the nuanced expert knowledge if there's only two people saying it? That's why it can't work that out, because it has to take an expert to look at another expert's opinion and go, that's pretty fucking game changing, that opinion.
Can I suggest something to you quickly, Ben, on this? You are going to prefer Perplexity.
I use Perplexity as well.
Okay, good. But that's citations. That's the thing that you are missing. I
also don't care about citations most of the time, because I will just make an evaluation of the source based off my own knowledge.
Fair enough. What if you don't know the source? That's the problem with the LLMs.
Yeah,
you don't often know the source.
I find that because I think that my knowledge in what I do is fairly decent. I just find that the internet is not full of information that really, is valuable to me. It's really difficult.
Prompting against your expertise, which
precisely. But that I'm still learning how to use it more. And that second tool would probably be, I think, the generative AI stuff that Adobe have done with Firefly, and even just in Photoshop, like just like expanding out what was the technical term for it? Generative fill, like it's generative fill, where just generative fill, where like, or just like removing. I mean, there are lots of different tools that do this now. Just removing stuff from photos, or like doing my thumbnails. Like I prefer the shot where my head is slightly over to here, but then the aspect ratio means that there's a big white space on the side here, and I'll just fill that out. I think that is super, super useful for a lot of people in a lot of different use cases. I've seen a lot of people play around with changing vertical to horizontal. They filmed everything in vertical. They'll keep that vertical shot in the middle, and then they'll use generative fill to fill the outsides. And it looks completely natural. Like you can't tell any difference. And I think that like those use cases are really, really valuable to people just by, again, building on the thing that somebody did that is natural, organic, whatever you want to call it, and then just using AI to just either fix it, slightly improve it, get it to the end result, because there's nothing worse than, going out and filming or taking photos and then there's this one that's almost perfect, but it's not perfect. But you could use some sort of generative fill tool or remover to make it perfect. What's wrong with that? What is there anything wrong with that? The AI hater's going to say that, well, no, you can't do that.
Exactly, because it's exactly what you'd have done in post, right? You'd have gone into Adobe and fixed that thing. Like, the greatest thing is Gen Video Fill. Gen Video Fill is about to drop into
that will be, you could, like you said, you could do all of these things manually before, but it would take you hours. Or if you're a beginner, you can't do it. But you can do it in literally 30 seconds. The final...
Before there, have either of you seen, there's a really ancient clip of Adobe being introduced into the world, and it's the head of product is sat on a couch, and it's an American talk show, and they're saying it's under criticism because they basically took a book cover of like a tree and centered the tree. And they were like, this is going to end photography. We will not know what is real and fake. And it's like all the same narratives. And this was from the early 90s. And you watch that video clip and you go, history repeats itself. But that cognitive dissonance that everybody feels when you see something new, human beings have such a negative bias. Like you look at something and we have to find 9 reasons why it's going to end everything, ruin everything, change everything. As opposed to like, oh, I'm a photographer. Now I am not bound by this one shot that was almost perfect, but not perfect. Now in this new era, in a generative era, people with conceivably little to no skills now have access and the ability to do these types of adjustments. So it's a really interesting phenomenon I see going on in the world, and it's history repeating itself.
That's why I don't quite understand the difference between somebody putting a photo in Lightroom and editing it. You're using computer with technology to edit a photo.
Do you know what? There's actually zero difference.
What's the difference?
Lightroom uses machine learning, which itself is just AI.
Yeah.
So it's literally the same side of the coin. It's the different side of the coin. It's just about people's perception of whether it's okay to do, because in Lightroom, obviously you're manually moving faders around, and that's called human input. In AI, you just give it to it and then hope. But I would argue, actually, if you're a good prompter, you do the same thing. You say, remove this dog from this photo. The AI is not going to guess you want the dog removed. It's going to do what it tells you to do, like an assistant. And like, if you're a creator full-time listening to this and you're in benches and not like me, a creative agency owner, it's the best thing since sliced bread, because think about this. If you're a photographer and you hate editing and you spend all of your hours editing, you can just go out and do photography now. That's the whole point of what you got into what you did in the first place. And you didn't like the post-production stuff, maybe. Now, let's say you're a full-time editor and you don't do photography. That's a bit more different and troubling, because obviously there's AI that can do your job, versus the actual photographer needs to still take the shots. So it depends what type of creator you are right now, but it should be seen as very beneficial to focusing on what you want to actually do more of, rather than the opposite.
Yeah, no, I agree. It goes back to the point that I made right at the beginning, where my objective is to find tools and resources for creators that makes their job easier so they can produce more content or better content. Exactly. And by using different AI tools, it's going to just speed up parts of the workflow that are either really long for you or you just hate doing. And so the output is not very good. And so for some people that will be script writing. For some people it will be the editing. Even just stuff where, you know, I've seen the ones with the eye corrections where you're just like people that are not very good at looking directly into the camera when they speak on videos and they just read off the left. And you can now get ones. V do a good one where it looks like you're looking at the camera. Just like small use cases like that make marginal differences to content, but collectively can add together over time to, you know, have that like 10-15% impact.
100%. Like I would say, this is a bit of a controversial thing to say, but I'm going to get it out there. I've had a renaissance with a capital AI in my workflow. I genuinely enjoy what I do again. I used to hate being in Photoshop for hours and hours and then it crashing on me and losing all those deliverables because I never even enjoyed that bit in the first place. You know, the ideas is where I enjoy creative. So to spend then 10 hours executing it and it just completely crash and you lose all of that work, that's not an idea of creative fun to me. That's an idea of hell. So like nowadays, I totally love what I do again. And I found repassion for everything.
Yeah, I love that. I imagine a lot of people have that same sentiment, as in, I think a lot of people found that with social media, going, you know what, now I have a place where I can share ideas, I can get feedback, I can get attention, where people will hate, love, like, I have digital affirmation. There's these moments in history which are very, they're very prominent in changing social consciousness. And all the creatives that I know that are really at the forefront of innovation, they share that same mindset. They just have this new fuel, which is, I am in a playground of things I get to try and explore. There's a term that was coined by a comedian that I love, and he called it being hungry-eyed. And as a very successful comedian, he would now still go to these kind of walk-ins. He can sell out stadiums today. And every week he shows up at these obscure walk-ins in every city because he wants to be hungry-eyed. He wants to be taken back to that moment where he had fuel, where he was most fulfilled as a creative, as someone expressing himself. And I think about that in creative now, like the fact that there's not just one tool that you learn to master and there's like 50 that you've got to go. That's kind of fun, right? For the right person. Yes, it can be intimidating without a doubt of like staying up to date. But more often than not, if you love your craft, I think it's fuel for most people.
Well, the more combinations of tools, the more unique you can be too, right? Because if there's only 5 good ones on the market, everyone looks the same. Whereas if there's 50, you can make unique combinations of these things. And
you would argue, though, just on that point, Chris, like you said this to me before, Ben, like most of them are mediocre versions of like there's one dominant platform that does it well, right?
Yeah, there's lots of I said the bubble is going to burst soon because there are too many tools coming onto the market in the same categories, not offering enough of a USP compared to the other competitors. They're competing on price, but it's good because it will drive the price down, hopefully, because creator tools aren't cheap. They're all SaaS models. They're all $20 to $30, and you know, we as creators, we don't need another subscription service to add on to our already existing stack of subscription services. I don't mind, but the mass market of creators don't make any money, and so, you know, even just spending $25 to $30 on the Adobe Creative Suite is far too much for a lot of people, and so that's just an interesting thing. But on the last tool, the last tool is the one that I wanted to raise. It was mentioned earlier as HeyGen, because I am on the verge of doing an experiment with HeyGen when it's good enough that a lot of people don't talk about. So Mr. Beast, obviously, he dubs his content, right? Everybody talks about, Mr. Beast dubs content, we should do it. But nobody who's actually like a small or medium size creator has actually gone and done that and seen whether it has been successful and case studied it. I'm on the verge of trying to do it potentially. So basically, but I'm thinking about what the problems could be. So my assistant, she speaks French and Arabic. So I'm 2 fairly big languages. So I'm tempted to get her to do all of the dubbing. Because at the end of the day, if I'm doing dubbing, how do I know what the dubbing is if I don't speak that language? First problem is that is the problem. Secondly, if I'm building a everyone talks about community. If I'm building another TikTok in a completely different language, how do I manage the community of comments there that are all in a completely different language? Do I? How do I manage that? Do they realize that I'm an English creator or that I'm not? Or like, where do I declare that? Does that mean that they don't like me because actually I don't actually speak that language? And what the negative connotations are of that? Maybe they're countered by me just providing lots of value. People don't really give a shit. Like, I don't know. But then as that scales and I have 100,000 TikTok account in French and I'm not French and I don't have any sort of role in that account because it's just, I don't speak the language. What does that mean for me as a creator? Obviously, the net value is positive, but at the same time, people go, "Oh well, yeah, just all you have to do is put your video in and you just clip it up into 20 different languages and put it everywhere." And Mr. Beast does it, so it must be the best strategy ever. I just don't. I'm unsure of like how feasible that is. Again, also someone's got to do that. Someone has to do that. Someone has to post it. It's not just a one-click button. You've got to check it. Are there subtitles? Who's checking the subtitles? All of this. And so, again, even though that tool, the dubbing tool of the mouth movement, sorry for people that don't understand, it's just where it's the mouth moving in the different language is now at a point where it's nearly there with not much morphing. There's a little bit of morphing in terms of unusual mouth movement, and you can tell it's had some thinking, but in the next year, that will be, I think, pretty perfect.
I'll tell you why it's revolutionary, shall I? Have you ever actually watched a film whilst being abroad and heard the overdubbing?
Well, yeah, the dubbing's awful, isn't it? Right?
It's not the person. Like, I watched Breaking Bad in Spain in English, and the person who was Heisenberg sounded nothing and looked nothing like the actual Heisenberg. Whereas Hey Jen, it's your actual voice speaking Arabic. It's your voice speaking French. It's not some actor that's been paid to overdub you because they know the native language. People will lose the immersion there because when Heisenberg looks like Heisenberg and sounds like Uncle Frank, you lose touch.
But I'm questioning the value of what that brings back to me as a creator with the reach, right? Say if I have 100,000 followers on TikTok in a French language account, how does that make me money? How does that bring me value back to my English main brand? Because I can't probably do any sponsorship opportunities really because, like, I don't know. I'm like
you
the
could
time
maybe utilize the same tech. Like you record your advert in English, hit French, Hey Jen, they agree, and there it goes on the French.
Would they be? Yeah, it's whether brand would be okay with that because. But I'm on the verge. It's on my list of things to do as to whether to explore that and actually be a better case study for all other creators and say, look, I'm not Mr. Beast here because that's not a good case study. Everybody knows who Mr. Beast is. I'm a relatively unknown creator across the world. People don't know who I am, but my content is valuable. Is it reciprocated in the same way in a completely different language using an AI tool?
I've got another recommendation for you on that one. Synthesia.
I've heard of Synthesia. Yeah.
They're UK based, which is why I'm really interested to talk to them. So if you're hearing this, Synthesia, hit me up.
On that, Ben, I think one of the interesting things and the dilemmas you're having is the same thing any brand marketeer has. You're burdened with choice, and if you think of your core audience, you have scratched the surface of your potential with Western markets and English-speaking territories, whether that's UK, US, Australia, etc. And the question becomes then, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
There will become a time where it makes sense that you notice 10% of your audience is already Spanish. So now launching a Spanish channel suddenly starts to make sense. And how do you service them? Maybe AI will play a more significant role in servicing them. Maybe they'll get, personalized avatars dropped into a community that you're speaking that is native. Maybe, I think what you're doing that is fascinating is having and this is the thing I advocate most, is you have to have the humility to explore these new opportunities, but you have to be very clear on what you want and why you're doing it. And those things are sometimes at odds. Like, I'm going to try a load of new stuff. But trying stuff, and you mentioned it there, Ben, it comes at a cost. We don't think about opportunity cost. For every 10% of your day you have spent on, figuring that out, that 10% could have been done on giving your core audience like the content that they want and need that would be a multiplier. So I tend to believe that's the biggest dilemma for marketeers, content creators, startups. It's about choices and intention. And my general thesis around all of this is you start with the plan, you stay focused. 80% of what you do should be tried, tested system that you know works, and you should always leave 20% room for play. The 20% where you experiment, you play, you fail, and those dynamics seem to be where the people at the forefront tend to play.
I love that, because that's an inverse of the typical Pareto principle that I hear, because it's 20% of your content is, producing 100% of the value and 80% of it's wasted. So to give it that inverse of 20% of your time should be for creating new things and trying and experimenting. I love that. Another consideration for marketers, by the way, is I'm quite lucky that I've got an access to Spotify that not many people have got yet. And I can watch Joe Rogan in Spanish right now inside Spotify. He's not had to re-record that. And I can hear adverts from him in Spanish too. So one of the considerations here is, in these experiments you do, Ben, because it's so early, it's obviously really good to do now because it's not in every platform, but you could be in Instagram in a year from now and then just have a button underneath that says watch in Spanish. And you don't need to have uploaded that in Spanish. They all have done it for you. So then it's like, how much effort versus reward is it in this testing, in that this is the big debate I had about Clubhouse, if you guys know that platform. I said the day it came out, this is a feature and not a platform, and every other platform is going to incorporate an audio room into their platform. And look, Twitter Spaces, LinkedIn Audio, they've all got it now. And Clubhouse is irrelevant because it was always a feature and never a platform. So that's another massive issue with these AI tools is it integral to a new thing, or is it just going to be incorporated into everything and being seen as normal in a year from now?
It reminds me of the Sam Altman quote where he was doing an interview and he went, "I am going to steamroll your industry." I think he used the word steamroll when describing, he was asked a question about some fringe business. He's like, being honest, OpenAI is going to steamroll you. And there was something so ominous about how confident he was saying that. And I think it's symbolic of you'll have the homogenization of features, platforms that will be integrated within our day-to-day ecosystem. And the thing I'm advocating most with AI right now is I think the friction between having an idea and creating anything, whether that's content, a business, a website, whatever it is you want to create, that friction is slowly being eroded and being removed because of all of these tools. Does it mean that everything's great? Of course not. But it does mean that we are headed in a very clear direction. So when I think about that as a marketeer or a business owner, the only advantage I think anyone has in the future is an audience, attention, or distribution. One of those three things. And it's actually one of the reasons why I'm highly motivated and haven't been historically to go, I want to gain a competitive advantage for my businesses and investments by building an audience and a platform. And I know both of you appreciate that because you've made that same conscious decision at some point in your life to go, right, I'm going to invest a lot of my energy, my space, my creative talent into this thing. So yeah, I think we're at a fascinating time.
I would add to that, by the way, storytelling. That's one of the things that's going to differentiate in the future, because if you are great,
never changes.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, what I've noticed, though, in the AI space is really interesting. Like, you can have the best possible outcomes. Like, it looks like it was made by a Disney artist, but then it tells no story, and it's therefore not interesting.
Yeah, it's the same with business. It's like I've spent a lot of time working with complex industries, and I often say almost all of them have the curse of knowledge. They live in a bubble, they live in an echo chamber, they know too much about their thing. And there is some conventional wisdom. If you were marketing to people more broadly, you should aim for like a 90 IQ. Aim for the average person, even if you're selling complex products. And going on like the prime user cases, I won't add more technology into the mix from my perspective, but I will say the bits that AI has enhanced my work massively is automations, taking away tasks I don't want to do, or tasks that I'm spending too much time on. Some creative tools, many of the you have mentioned, I think the post-production capabilities are phenomenal, whether it's like expanders, generative fill you mentioned there. I know some of our teams are playing with avatars and HeyGen and actually fully creating content with their avatars because they're maybe not as confident as speakers on camera. So that kind of helps them. Ben, you mentioned it, data, rationalizing lots of custom data that's unique to you. That has been revolutionary for our strategy teams. Often we can spend days analyzing things. Now it takes minutes and some understanding of how to ask the right question. I think that's mind-blowing. And then probably the last thing for me that has been the biggest unlock is it has reignited, to your point, Chris, it's reignited like this thirst for like new technologies. Inspiration comes and goes, motivation comes and goes, but when it really does feel like we're in a unique time in history whereby like there is an excess and an abundance of opportunity, and the only thing that stops you taking advantage is like a lack of curiosity and a lack of willingness to go out, look, try and experiment. And that for me, for anyone young at the start of their career, anyone who's a bit jaded in their current career, I think that is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think they're really good points, actually. You know, one of the simplest and easiest ways to say this is I'm a very simple person when it comes to measuring how much I like something and enjoy something. So, like, when one of the AI tools that I was waiting to come out recently called Runway Gen 3, which is pretty much the next level video platform, I was excited about it like I was PS1 and PS2 drops when I was a kid. And I literally waited up all night, and then I didn't sleep for 24 hours after I got access to it. And I sold my PS5 because I said, this is as fun and makes me money. This is fun, but doesn't make me money. That's what the PS5 was. So they're my definitions of creativity, enjoyment, like, and it's so simple. Like, if you can't stop using it, and you genuinely would do it without getting paid client work, it's for you, you know?
So you're advocating for everyone picking up their consoles, throwing them out of the window.
I mean, seriously.
Becoming an AI expert.
I talked to a kid on my own podcast called In AI Nutshell, and he is a 25-year-old making $100,000 a month from Etsy because of AI. That is like exactly who you want to see, right? Like, and he's not trying to sell a course or telling anyone any of this stuff. He doesn't want to create his own competitors. And talking earlier about stuff, you know, clone armies are out there. So people are watching him like a hawk because they're trying to pick apart how he's done what he's done as an individual 25-year-old with no design background, with $100K a month e-commerce store. Like, it's AI is the only thing that could have enabled that. And he loves it. He says it doesn't feel like work to him. He just loves it.
My man, I love that. Absolutely love that. Look, gents, I've enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to the next one. I think our promise to anyone listening is we are going to explore interesting things for us. Hopefully they're interesting for you, and we'll try and provide actionable value, because I think that's the key. There's a lot of vaguisms in emerging technology, and I think it's really important to be specific and talk from a practitioner's standpoint. So I'm excited to keep having conversations, gents, and I'll chat to you next week.
Sweet. Cheers, guys.